Welcome back, everyone. We are now in week 3 of production of this podcast/show for everyone. This is our news episode for this week. We're heading into week 10 of the college football season. We just wanted to start off with yet another apology. We tweeted out something not too long ago that we did not record last night due to the presidential election and just trying to keep all the focus over there, giving that the national spotlight it needs. Turns out that's now turning into something that's probably going to go on for a little bit longer than just one night. So here we are recording during the middle of it anyway, but that's all right. So Leif and I are back with our news episode. We're going to talk some college football. A lot happened last weekend that we'll get to later in the episode, but we've highlighted in a few episodes before the issue that's happening with the University of Wisconsin. They have had probably the second largest at this point COVID outbreak on a football roster. They now have 25 total cases that we know of this far. 15 of those are players, 10 members of the coaching staff and football staff, and all of this reported only over a week's worth of time. What can we digest or unpack here at the University of Wisconsin?
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like Florida. You just don't know how long it's going to take until there's enough players to play, and you don't know. I mean, we know about Graham Mertz, and that's kind of the only one that was told to us that had tested positive. But now we have 15 players and 10 staff members. So you really don't know. All you know is that this week's game against Illinois has been canceled, and from then on, you just try to see when you have enough healthy bodies to play a game and not risk the other team's health as well. So we'll see, and then that's to be determined that no one really knows other than the Big Ten, like officials and team members.
Absolutely, yeah. So some of those players have been relocated to hotel rooms. They're alone there in isolation, trying to do whatever they can to contain the spread for progressing further. What do we think has necessarily gone wrong here in this situation? Because the Big Ten has implicated daily testing to avoid outbreaks such as this on their universities and their football programs. But yet again, here we are with another storyline of 15 players testing positive and 10 coaches.
I mean, I just think it's an imperfect system, and if one thing goes wrong, it's so contagious that it could lead to a lot of things going wrong, and that's what we're seeing here, that a lot of people have tested positive, but it may have just started with one person or one staffer, and it's a slippery slope because we don't exactly know who was in contact with someone who already had coronavirus, and it's hard to determine how to fix it, and if they are trying to use preventative measures such as daily testing, and a lot of schools are doing that. And I think they're far from the first, and they're going to be far from the last team that has an outbreak. And it's just because there's too many people on football teams and without enough money to go into a bubble like the NBA did. I think there's going to be a lot of these type of things happening, sadly, until we find a way to slow the outbreak as a nation. And I don't think it's a college football thing. And some programs are doing better than others, but I mean, it's going to happen until the nation is able to slow down the outbreak.
I think that's a really interesting point that you just brought up there. It's affecting the college football programs, but it's such a national issue, right? Wisconsin right now is being viewed as one of the biggest hotspots in the country, if not the world, for COVID-19 at this current moment. Their cases are on the rise drastically. And so now you see it translating into their football team. And we know these athletes aren't in a bubble. They're not supposed to just be sitting in one spot doing nothing, essentially, other than going to practice, playing games, and all that good stuff. They're college students just like me and you, right? They have to, if they have classes in person, they have to go. If they have to go get groceries, they're going to go do social interactions and hang out with their friends outside of school. So this is a very different situation than the NBA or like what the professional baseball was able to do with the World Series and the playoffs of setting up their own bubble there. So we're not dealing with a bubble issue or a bubble situation here. We're dealing with college kids that basically have lives outside of their respected sports. But I think another good point that you brought up too is this isn't a perfect system. Even testing every single day is not a perfect system. So you see false positives, you see false negatives. Things are just not perfect. And you look at what Michael Mole, the assistant athletic director, for sports medicine at the University of Wisconsin and their chief infection officer for the Big Ten. He said, quote, "You look at our state, look at our entire nation and across the world, as hard as people have tried, we haven't completely solved this. We haven't figured it out. We're just trying to do the best we can." So we have universities here that are trying to put on a performance and trying to put on this program of college football for everyone, and it's still not a perfect system, and then things like this happen.
Yeah, I mean, like the way I think of it is, okay, the NBA had a flawless system, but those athletes are being paid ridiculous amounts of money, and there was a ridiculous amount of money for the organization, the NBA itself, to set up that type of bubble that was able to accommodate those high-profile athletes. In college, the best you can do is really set up like a college football playoff type of bubble. There's not enough money around all of college sports, especially considering that they needed to get the seasons going to even make any revenue. At most schools, they were like, we got to get football going, or like, the rare school like Duke, for instance, they need to get basketball going to make money. But to get those sports going, you have to have health, and you can't have money to make put a bubble up and the money to make money from playing football. It just doesn't work. So it's really just a nationwide issue, and then the best people can do is the best they can do. Like Wisconsin probably didn't go out partying after their win against Illinois, but they got a positive test, and now it's really spreading out, and probably the same for Florida. And I think that the Big Ten's being safe. They have no fans, and they're trying their best, but it's not necessarily a Wisconsin Badger issue. I think it's the state of Wisconsin, as the AD said.
Yeah, I think one other really interesting point to talk about in this whole situation is the differential in how conferences are handling COVID outbreaks. For example, you look at Trevor Lawrence. He has in the ACC, there's a 10-day mandatory, like you can't do anything, like you're shut down for 10 days. And the Big Ten, that's 21 days. That's an extra 11 days that you can't do football activities, you can't practice, you can't be with the team, you can't really study film, all of that stuff. So you look at this Wisconsin team, you're now dealing with 15 players that are on that 21-day waiting period once they are done testing positive. Does that make sense? Like you have these people that are going to miss 3 weeks of the season, regardless of what happens, even like starting now until they're done testing positive. So I think if you look at it from an NCAA standpoint, it's going to be really hard to kind of dictate what to do with a team like Wisconsin that has all of these issues happening to them, and they're probably not even going to be able to play for at least 3 weeks. It's like we saw with Florida, and they already had a shortened season to begin with.
Yeah, I think the shortened season's the biggest part, is because the SEC was able to have compensatory games. Like they were able to reschedule Florida, Missouri last weekend. The Big Ten doesn't necessarily have that luxury, and if they do, then what happens to the college football playoff? Or like they've got to have 3 extra weeks to make up these games. And with that being said, I have a question here. Like, what do you make of it for Wisconsin? Because they had Graham Mertz like show up, show out, and they're a top 10 team in the country. And now they're not able to play for 3 weeks. What are the implications, assuming everyone comes back healthy at some point in time? Like, does this help Wisconsin because they would have been shorthanded against Purdue and Nebraska and then Michigan in the next 3 weeks? Or does this just derail their season because they have to play too many games in too short a span?
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer to that, but all I know is either way, it's not good, right? I think you were looking at a team in Wisconsin that was probably the only other team in the Big Ten that could really hold a candle to Ohio State and play with them for all 4 quarters of the game. And now, even if you look at it like, oh, they didn't have to play these teams shorthanded, they might avoid a loss. They're still out 3 weeks of prep. That's a whole month of training, of practice, of fitness, of all of that stuff. So you look at that, they're going to be shorthanded regardless, even if they have all of their players, if they take on an Ohio State team like that. And also, I don't see a way that the college football playoff can put a team in that's only played 3 games into the playoff, even if they're undefeated and beating Ohio State. So I don't know, man. I think it's a really, really difficult situation. I know this is drawing a lot of spotlight because Wisconsin is supposed to be one of those teams that competes for those like spots in the Rose Bowl and all these big things, but this is happening elsewhere throughout the country. This is just one of the ones that's easiest to highlight because they have such notoriety.
Absolutely. And that's to that point is everywhere's going to have this. And so we just have to, as a country, hope that it gets better and not blame these athletes because they're just doing their best, just like everyone else.
Yeah, I think one last thing I'll add to this is I think some of this may possibly have been able to be avoided if the NCAA were to come out at the very beginning and say these are guidelines that are going to govern over all of the conferences. I understand if you guys want to start early and you feel like that's okay, but we're going to dictate these standards and these terms and say we're not going to have fans. You saw Major League Baseball play their entire 60-game season without fans. They just started allowing fans into the postseason when they had set up a bubble. So I think it's a little bit foolish for some of those Southern teams to have 60,000 fans in their stadiums. That's me guessing as to what they say. They say they cap it at 19,000, but it looks like a whole lot more. And so I think it was a miss a little bit for the NCAA to be like, we are the governing body of all of these things, and we're going to lay out these terms that everyone has to abide by. So I think that's really gonna be a thing that we can look at moving forward and say, obviously you can say now with sitting back, looking back on it, like this is gonna hurt Wisconsin, and this should have been done earlier. But if this didn't happen to Wisconsin, maybe we're not having this sort of conversation. So some interesting storylines there. Do you have anything else to add before we move on?
No, I mean, I think you covered it, and I think it'll just be interesting to see what team's able to avoid the pandemic the best, and I think that'll really help provide the best football. You know, if a team's able to be healthy down the road, they can be the best contender just because they're available. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and in previews, but in this time in the news episode, the best ability is availability, and so and I think that'll prove true as this season goes on, especially this season, even more than others.
Speaking of availability, Trevor Lawrence is not available this weekend for their matchup with number 4 Notre Dame in South Bend. He's aiming to travel with the team to be there on the sideline to help coach DJ through some of these situations that he's going to face playing a good Notre Dame team on the road, but he will not be in uniform to play with Clemson. We're going to preview this game. Obviously, it's the biggest matchup this week. We're going to preview this heavily in our preview episode. I think Leif and I still have to talk whether that's going to come out Thursday or Friday. But what do we make of the situation with Trevor? Seeing that latest reports, he still feels very good. He feels healthy. He just is in that recovery phase where he's not going to be able to go for this game in particular.
I mean, I think if he's showing no symptoms and tested negative the required amount of times, then he should be able to go with his team. I'm happy for him to be able to be there and coach up the young freshman DJ, 5-star recruit, but you're playing in South Bend, which does have fans and is a very good team. So I'd hope he's able to go, but it's really, I almost would say side with caution though, just in case that there's something he got a false negative or something, and heaven forbid that happen, and then you have Clemson, another high profile team, and maybe Notre Dame then too, get positive tests. So I really hope they play this with an abundance of caution. It'll be a really interesting story to see how much of a role he plays if he does make the sideline and help coaching, if he's involved in some play calling, knowing because he's played them before. It'll be interesting to monitor, and obviously I wish he was playing, but it should still be a great game, and we'll have that one for you in the coming days.
Absolutely, I think it was pretty good analysis there. Moving forward with our news this week, we have the 5th of 5 Power Conference starting this weekend. The Pac-12 returns to play. This is good news for us out here in Utah-based. We get to see the teams that we're a little bit more familiar with start to take the field a little bit. It starts off with a few headline matchups. The Stanford Cardinal goes into Autzen Stadium and taking on the number 12 Oregon Ducks. That game's actually scheduled at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. So pretty clearly right off the bat, the college football world is saying this is a matchup that's very important and it deserves prime time. And this is the chance to see what Oregon and Stanford have to offer as two of the best teams in the Pac-12 North.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I think they pay a lot of respect to what those two programs have done in the past 10 years. And they've been two of the best programs, not only in the West, not only the Pac-12, but in the country the past 10 years. Both of them have won a few Rose Bowls. Both of them have won the Pac-12 many times and competed for the playoffs. Oregon made the playoffs in 2014, and Stanford's been on the doorstep a few times. They were fifth spot in 2015, 2016. And I think it's really good that they're spotlighting the conferences that haven't been able to showcase what they've got yet and provide what the nation will like, demonstrate that all around the country there's good teams, because we saw it for Cincinnati, we saw it for the American, now let's see the Pac-12.
Absolutely. Another matchup to kind of highlight here is in the Pac-12 South Division. Two of the up-and-coming teams in that region. I mean, USC is not really up-and-coming. They're always there. They're always relevant. They're that name brand school in the Pac-12. But they're taking on Arizona State with Herm Edwards at the helm, who is really starting to make some impacts there in this division. What do we expect to see there as Arizona State heads into the Coliseum? They actually play that game at noon Eastern as well, so that's a 10. That's actually
a 9 o'clock.
Yeah, a 9 o'clock kick in California. So that's really early.
That's not a fun wake up on. You got to prep for that one and take up warm ups and be there at like 6 a.m. maybe. That I don't know if I'd enjoy that, but it'll be a good game. And whoever shows up the sharpest, I mean, that really matters. Like some people whoever's team's more motivated and ready to play as a whole should have the advantage in this game. And that game features some really good young quarterbacks, Keaton Slovis and Jaden Daniels. So I'm really excited for that one as well. And we'll probably be previewing that one for you guys in the coming days as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to pull up the schedule to make sure we have that start time right. Even to me, that doesn't even sound quite right yet. But I'll get back to you if I do there. I'm going to pose a question to you. What can we expect from the Pac-12 this season? I know a lot of things are fluctuating. What can we expect in terms of the play level and things that we're going to see out of this conference?
I think there should be some tempered expectations, just because they've had the worst schedule in terms of the coronavirus and how they've impacted their practices. I mean, a lot of the California schools weren't even allowed to practice until a month ago, and a lot of their practices were off-site or only with certain position groups, whereas a lot of the school, ACC, SEC, even the Big Ten had more time to practice before the season. And obviously they're playing against one another, but it's still, you're not going to be as sharp. I think that the most talented team in the conference is Oregon, but they lost probably 4 of their best 5 players, not only to the draft, but even the returning players, 4 of the best 5 on their team, in my opinion, with the 5th that is playing being CJ Verdell, the running back. I think they're sitting out. And so if you have such talent sitting out in Penei Sewell, who will be a top 5 pick, an absolute dominant tackle, and their entire secondary sitting out, that they don't necessarily have the depth in terms of talent to compete for a college football playoff. But if they run the gambit, that anything could happen. And so I think a lot of these teams going 6-0 is a lot easier than going 12-0. And so it's possible, but I don't think everyone should expect, a Pac-12 team should make the playoff this year. I think it's really hard when you have less practice time and not necessarily the talent of some of the other teams in terms of what's returning.
I agree. I think you offered a lot of pieces there that I would have said as well. I did double check that game matchup time, and it is at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, so that is 9 a.m. West Coast. So really, really crucial start time there in that Arizona State USC game, which are probably 2 of the front runners for the Pac-12 South, other than Utah, probably, who gets underway this weekend with Arizona. So we've touched on the Pac-12 starting. We see 2 of their teams already ranked. They've been ranked for weeks now. We haven't really touched on it that much because they've still been like weeks away from even playing. Oregon's already fringe top 10 there, ranked at number 12, and USC's in the top 20 at number 20. What do we make of what the college football playoff poll and the AP poll are kind of sending to the rest of the country, saying that these teams haven't even played yet, and they're still ranked over a lot of these teams that have been making moves already this season?
I think it's fair because it's typically a preseason poll and everyone starts the same week. So this is basically the preseason poll just with the Pac-12, and you've got an education of who can play in the other conferences. So that makes your poll better than a preseason poll typically would be. So now you can adjust after 1 week, and it'll be, there'll be swings. Like if Oregon is going to win, they could jump up. But if they lose, they could fall down to the outside top 20 because it's only 1 week of play. But I think generally, they did a pretty good job in ranking the teams that are ranked, and I think a few more teams will be ranked in the Pac-12 by the end of the season.
I agree. I think you can probably honestly see that after this weekend if some of these teams perform well. I do agree. It's basically like a preseason poll. I still think it's just really hard to stand there and say, oh yeah, this is a preseason poll, but people have been playing for close to 10 weeks already. So it's really interesting to see what's happening there with all of that going on. But speaking to what's happening in the polls, we like to close these news episodes off with ranking shifts. There's been a lot of moving this week. We've seen 3 teams fall out of the top 25, North Carolina, Kansas State, and Penn State. They all fell outside of the top 25. Let's start there. And do we think all of those moves are legitimate at this point?
I think that was just tough luck for Penn State. I think they're a top 25 team. I think Kansas State, without their quarterback Skylar Thompson, they got drubbed by West Virginia. I don't know if they're a top 25 team, especially with Pac-12 coming back. And North Carolina, they had a really nice start under Mac Brown, but their defense isn't legit enough. They lost to Virginia, who's struggling in the ACC. So I think they're outside. I think Penn State just had a tough schedule. I think Indiana was underrated to start the year, proved to be a good team, and that upset hurt their ranking. And Penn State was expected to lose to Ohio State, so why should they drop more than 7 spots? We're from 18 to outside the top 25. I think they'll find their way back into the top 25, and they certainly are that type of caliber team.
I think they can climb their way back into the top 25, like you touched on. But I also think it's unfair to any other team in the top 25 to say an 0-2 team deserves to be in there. You know what I mean? Like they've lost both of their games to open the season. They're out, in my opinion. So I think as of right now, they're outside looking in. They have to have a few really good weeks in a row to even crack that top 25 fringe again. I think with North Carolina, it's going to have some pretty significant impact on the rest of the ACC, because that was supposed to be a team that was a test for Clemson, a test for Notre Dame, and these teams to see how legit these programs are. So with them completely falling off the face of the earth with a few losses, it's basically down to this weekend's matchup between Notre Dame and Clemson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think North Carolina has the talent to score points. They just won't be able to stop either of those teams. I think if North Carolina plays Notre Dame, they can score, and if they can hope to have a bad passing day from Book and just load up the running game on Kyron Williams and that dominant offensive line, they have a chance. I don't think they have any chance against Clemson. But Clemson already beat Miami too, and Miami was supposed to be that other team that had the talent on defense to be able to slow down Clemson, and that was a drubbing. So this matchup, and it's a shame Trevor Lawrence isn't playing, so you don't get the best against the best. But this is for the ACC, and I'm pretty sure everyone across the country would really agree with that. And this is for playoff spots. Both teams, this has a huge playoff implication, and we'll really analyze and delve deep into that game. But just generally, if you take the 1-4 team in the country, obviously that's going to have some playoff implications. But this year more than ever, because there's certainty that there's 3 great teams that you can see on paper, being Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State. So if Trevor Lawrence is not there and Notre Dame is able to beat Clemson in a year full of uncertainty, that might book their spot in a very tough year to make a playoff.
I think that's very well said. Let's keep it in the top 5 right now. We're going to cover those top 5 teams that it goes with what you touched on. It goes Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and then Georgia rounds out the top 5. We touched on Oklahoma State a lot in some of our episodes. They were ranked in that 6th spot, that fringe spot for the Big 12 to have their playoff contender. They just lost this weekend to Texas. They fell 8 spots down to number 14, and Cincinnati actually bumped up into that number 6 spot as that other outside team looking in to these top 5 teams who have a lot left to prove, especially outside of Alabama and Ohio State, a Clemson team without Trevor Lawrence, and Notre Dame and Georgia, who have shown some vulnerability.
Yeah, for sure. And then this is as good of a year as you can ask for Cincinnati to be playing this well. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, and you're on the doorstep. If Notre Dame loses to Clemson as they're supposed to, and Georgia's playing Florida this weekend, you could be the fourth spot as soon as this at the end of this weekend if you take care of your own business. And so this is a great year for sports because there's so much uncertainty, and what makes sports good is not knowing the outcomes of games. Like Cinderellas are the best part of March Madness, and you don't really get those in college football. So I'm really excited to see a non-power conference have a real shot to make a playoff.
We'll keep it right there with the Cinderella analogy, but first off, I do want to just give a little hint, a little preview, a little floater of Georgia does play Florida this week as well. So that is the SEC East showdown, and that is probably a playoff eliminator as both of them have a loss already on the season. So the other one's out. Winner has a chance still to beat Alabama. So the winner of that game will have a serious leg up to take on Alabama in the SEC championship game. So a little side note there. But sticking with Cinderella stories is we have Coastal Carolina, of course. They're up to number 15, but a team that's kind of flown under the radar a little bit, even if you can even say so, is Marshall. They're right there behind them at 16.
Thundering Herd, they wanted to be heard. They didn't like that we talked about the Chanticleers, but not them. So we are Marshall on this show as well.
Yeah, kind of crazy to see these names pop up. I did hear something out of like a USC camp saying like they're a little embarrassed that Coastal Carolina and Marshall and a team like BYU is ranked ahead of them, even though they haven't played a game yet. So I thought that was a little comical to sit there and hear coming out of the USC camp. But these teams are very much proved that they're legitimate contenders in their so-called conferences, in their so-called divisions, and things like that. Like they're clearly dismantling teams. Coastal Carolina won 51-0 last week. BYU has beaten everyone that they've seen fairly handily, except one week where they only won by a touchdown. So let's keep it right there and talk about that BYU. They've jumped actually into the top 10 and sit at number 9 now.
I think so far in the season, they've taken care of business well enough to be a top 10 team, especially with the Big Ten and Pac-12 not having enough games under their belt. I'm not sure they're a top 10 quality team in the country necessarily, just in terms of roster talent, but they're certainly playing well enough to deserve it based on who's actually playing games. And so I'm happy for Kalani Sitake and Zach Wilson and that team. They're playing well. They're doing the best they can, and all you can ask for is taking care of your own business, and you just hope that you get the recognition from the polls.
Yeah, we might need a 2-hour preview episode coming up for this weekend because BYU plays Boise State, their biggest game of the week of their season this week as well. So we got so much to cover for you guys in our next episode. So stay tuned for all of these games. There are going to be so many this weekend that make or break some of these teams' chances. And we've been highlighting them. We've been hinting at them that they're coming. We're going to see these teams tested. The weekend is here to talk about that stuff. So we're going to have a tasty and a full preview episode for everyone moving forward at some time, either Thursday or Friday, schedule depending for Leif and I. A couple more things here in the rankings real quick before we sign off. Michigan got knocked off this weekend. They fell 10 spots to number 23. So we touched on there's always this trio of Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan in the Big Ten East. Now it basically is just a one-way ticket here with Ohio State.
I think this year was always going to be that way, but Michigan showed that they had the capacity in that first game. They ran the ball like mad on what was supposed to be a good Minnesota team. They showed their defense didn't lose too much, even though they lost all their linebackers to the NFL. And then they played a stumper of a game. Michigan State came out and played. I want to give credit to Mel Tucker and that team. But Michigan, you can't – I think what makes Ohio State so good in the Big Ten East, and Penn State has been better than Michigan the past few years, is just consistency. Ohio State consistently comes out, and they can have like lulls for a quarter, but it certainly doesn't last through a full game. And Michigan seems to have 1 or 2 games a year where they don't come out to play and it bites them in the butt.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very, very good analysis there that Ohio State's kind of the only contender left in the Big Ten East, potentially even the Big Ten period, with a little bit of an asterisk there with what's happening in Wisconsin. So one last thing before we sign off, we're going to give Liberty a quick shout out. They're 6-0 and they got they got slotted in there at number 25 this week. So shout out to Liberty for cracking the top 25.
Yeah, and they pulled a Power 5 upset at one point too. So good for them.
Yeah, good on them. Good on them there. So that's going to do it for Leif and I today. Sorry again that we're a day late. We just thought the attention was better served there Tuesday night. We'll update you all on how things are progressing for our preview episode. Like we said, there's so much to touch on. There's so much to cover. So we want to make sure we're getting the right information for you all there. So stay tuned to see when that episode's going to drop. It will be Friday at the very latest. We'll get it out before the weekend slate of games. So thanks everyone for all the support, continued support. Leif and I really appreciate it. As always, reach out, shout us out wherever you want to. We're happy to talk about stuff with you. And yeah, so you got anything else, Leif?
Yeah, just like we said, we got a juicy weekend of games. Please let us know if you have any games that you want to be covered, because there are so many games now, and I mean, there's a lot of fans out there. If you cover a team that we haven't mentioned and you want us to cover, like, we'll absolutely do it. And so we're looking forward to this weekend just as much as you are, and if not more. So we're happy to cover any games that you guys want, and we really appreciate your support.
Yeah, we'll go as long as Zoom doesn't cut us off. We'll go for as long as we can this weekend's recap. All right, everyone, take care. Enjoy your next few days, and we'll catch you later. All right.
Thank you.